The silver sky of Kyloria shimmered under the weight of 100 battles, each scar etched into the clouds above and the ground below. The New Era Coalition had fought valiantly to hold their line, but this new wave of aggressors was unlike anything they'd faced before. Alien tech blended seamlessly with human resilience as they tried to push forward, their determination fueled by both fear and hope. Captain Layla Torres stood at the helm of her command post, staring at the holographic map projected before her. Every inch of Kyloria's surface seemed alight with conflict. She clenched her fists, steeling herself for what lay ahead. With each chapter of this war, her troops had grown stronger, their bonds forged in fire and battle. But now, with enemy forces closing in, she wondered if even they could hold their ground. "Commander Torres, we've received intel." Lieutenant Erin Park's voice cut through her thoughts. Crisp and focused, Erin's hands moved over the console, bringing up a series of files and projections. The enemy has deployed a new type of assault drone. It's faster, smarter, and it's armed with weapons we've never seen before. Torres watched the rotating image of the drone in grim silence. Sleek and deadly, it seemed almost alive, as though its design was deliberately meant to instill fear in anyone who dared look at it. "We need a way to neutralize those drones before they reach the front line," she said, her voice unwavering. Park's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Our current tech is outdated against this, ma'am. They've adapted to every countermeasure we've deployed, but we may have a lead. There's an abandoned research facility on the outskirts of Sector 17, where rumors speak of a prototype EMP device zone that could give us the edge we need." Torres' mind raced. The facility had been off limits since the early days of the war, when the coalition decided it was too risky to maintain given its remote location and the dangers lurking within. No one knew exactly what lay inside that facility, only that it held secrets the coalition had been all too eager to bury. "Get the ghosts ready," she ordered. The ghosts were an elite unit of the coalition, known for their skill in infiltration and survival. They'd ventured into places no one else dared, retrieving vital intel, technology, and even saving entire battalions in desperate situations. Hours later, Layla Torres watched as the ghost team suited up in the hangar. Her second in command, a tall, stoic soldier named Marcus Cale, gave her a nod as he adjusted his visor. The rest of the ghosts were equally tense but resolute. For them, each mission was a test of endurance, skill, and nerve. "Captain, if this EMP device is even half of what they say, we might actually have a chance to turn the tide," Cale said, his voice carrying a weight of both hope and caution. "I don't believe in miracles, Marcus, but I do believe in you and your team," Torres replied. "Get that device and bring it back safely." The ghosts saluted her, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights of the hangar. One by one, they boarded their transport, and within minutes, they were a streak of silver against the blood-red horizon. As they neared the facility, the ghosts encountered hostile resistance, with drones swarming their path. The pilot, a veteran known only as Eagle, deftly maneuvered through the onslaught, his hands flying across the controls. They made it through the skies with a mix of raw skill and luck, landing just outside the entrance to the facility. Cale led the team through the maze of corridors, his pulse steady even as shadows danced around them, flickering remnants of long-forgotten battles. They had trained for moments like this, but the unknown lay heavy in the air. Every creak, every hiss felt amplified, as if the facility itself was alive, warning them to turn back. Deep within the facility, they found the EMP prototype, gleaming faintly within its containment chamber. It looked almost fragile, encased in glass and metal. Cale motioned for their tech specialist, Zara, to inspect it. "Can we transport it?" he asked, his voice a tense whisper. Zara nodded, hands deftly moving over the controls. "It'll be tricky, but yes, we'll need to be careful. The containment field is unstable. One wrong move, and it could go off, taking using half of this facility with it." As they prepared to secure the device, alarms blared. Enemy forces had picked up their signal. They were coming. "Brace yourselves," Cale shouted, his voice slicing through the chaos. The team moved in perfect synchronization, each member covering the others as they pushed forward with the EMP device in tow. The facility became a labyrinth of fire and shadows as they fought their way back to the surface, drones and soldiers pressing from all sides. Finally, they reached the surface, Battered but determined, Eagle was ready for them, engines roaring, and they barely made it onto the transport before it shot into the sky, enemy fire lighting up the horizon behind them. Back at the coalition base, Torres and her team awaited their return. When the ghosts finally arrived, carrying the EMP device, a cheer erupted from the gathered soldiers. Kale approached Torres, his armor scorched and cracked, but his eyes sharp and resolute. "Captain, we've got the device, it's ready." Torres nodded, her voice firm. "Then we move at dawn." The dawn assault was unlike anything the New Era coalition had attempted before. As they approached the enemy lines, the EMP was activated, unleashing a massive pulse that surged through the battlefield, disrupting the enemy drones in a cascade of blue light. Within seconds, the coalition soldiers surged forward, taking advantage of the confusion. Their once overwhelming enemy now lay vulnerable, struggling to recalibrate. In the midst of it all, Captain Torres led her troops with the fire of a leader who knew what it was to sacrifice. She knew the cost of freedom, of standing against impossible odds, but as they pressed forward, inch by inch, reclaiming the land they had lost, hope surged through her veins. The enemy's lines crumbled, their once mighty drones falling one by one. By nightfall, the coalition forces had secured a significant victory, and Kyloria's skies shimmered with the promise of a new day. The coalition's victory over the drones and the success in deploying the EMP marked a turning point on Kyloria. Morale soared, and for the first time in weeks, soldiers spoke of something other than survival. But beneath the surface, an unease began to settle over Captain Layla Torres and her core team. Something fell off. As the coalition regrouped, Torres received word from command that a high-ranking official was en route to Kyloria's base. He was bringing urgent orders. Lieutenant Aaron Park relayed the message, her brows knit in concern. "Captain, command didn't specify details, but they've put the entire sector on high alert. They're pulling us back from advancing further." "Pulling us back? After all the ground we've gained?" Torres' tone was sharp, masking her worry. The coalition had finally gained momentum, and retreating now felt like a betrayal to the soldiers who had given everything. Park nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Something's not right." Later that day, General Marcus Darnell's ship touched down at the base, a tall, imposing figure with a reputation for ruthless decision-making. Darnell strode into the command center with an air of superiority. His arrival brought with it a tension that clung to the air, thick and unsettling. "Captain Torres," Darnell began, his voice deep and commanding, "you and your team have done well, but I'm here to issue new directives from command." Torres clenched her jaw but kept her voice even. "Sir, with all due respect, my team is in a position to continue advancing. We've weakened their lines, and if we press forward, now." Darnell raised a hand, silencing her. "You've done your duty, Captain, but there are factors at play here beyond your understanding. Command has ordered a strategic withdrawal. You're to hold the line here and await further orders." Her frustration simmered just below the surface. "Respectfully, sir, pulling back will cost lives. My soldiers are ready to push forward." Darnell's expression was impassive. "This isn't open to discussion, Captain. Hold the line. That's an order." As night fell, Torres gathered her closest officers, Lieutenant Park, Marcus Cale, and a few others she trusted implicitly. She'd fought beside them too many times to doubt their loyalty. "There's more going on here than command is letting on," she said, her voice low. "Darnell's orders don't make sense. Pulling us back now feels like a death sentence." Cale crossed his arms, his eyes dark with suspicion. Could command have another agenda? Maybe they don't want us winning this war as much as they say. Park glanced around, lowering her voice. "I've heard rumors. Some say Darnell's been seen meeting with envoys from outside the coalition. If he's working with our enemies." Torres shook her head, unwilling to let paranoia cloud her judgment, but the unease gnawed at her. "If there's even a chance Darnell is working against us, we need proof. We can't risk the lives of our people based on rumors." Cale nodded. "Then we get proof. We follow him, monitor his movements, and find out what he's hiding." Over the next few days, Park and Cale kept Darnell under close surveillance, tracking his movements around the base. One night, Cale spotted him slipping into a secured area, a part of the base reserved only for high-level command personnel. Cale followed, moving through the shadows, until he saw Darnell entering a darkened communications room. Cale moved closer, pressing himself against the wall inside. He could make out muffled voices. Darnell was speaking to someone over a private comms line. "The coalition's progress here is jeopardizing our arrangement," Darnell was saying, his tone cold and calculating. "I'll continue to stall their advances, but my position here is becoming unstable. They're growing suspicious." The voice on the other end was distorted, unrecognizable. "You agreed to hold the coalition forces back. We paid a steep price for your cooperation. Fail us, and the consequences will be severe." Cale's blood ran cold. There it was, undeniable proof of Darnell's betrayal. He slipped away, knowing that if he stayed any longer, he'd be caught. Back in Torres' quarters, Cale relayed everything he'd heard. Torres' face was a mask of fury. "We can't confront him outright," she said, "not without risking exposure. But if he's stalling our forces, then every moment we waste could be another victory for the enemy. We need a plan." Park spoke up. "What if we split our forces? We follow his orders on the surface just enough to satisfy him, but quietly send a detachment to continue the offensive. The way he thinks we're obeying, but we're still moving forward." Torres nodded slowly, agreed. "We'll need to act quickly. If Darnell finds out, he'll have a sole court-martial either worse." Under the cover of night, Torres and a team initiated a covert operation. They kept up appearances, holding the line just as Darnell had ordered, but behind the scenes, they sent small, highly skilled units to strike the enemy's positions, destabilizing them without attracting attention. Each hit was swift and strategic, aimed at weakening the enemy without compromising their ruse. As the attacks continued, the enemy grew desperate. Darnell, sensing the coalition was slipping out of his control, became more erratic, his frustration spilling over intense interactions with Torres, but she kept her expression impassive, playing the obedient soldier while secretly orchestrating his undoing. Finally, word came through of a critical enemy supply line vulnerable to attack. If they could cut it off, they would cripple the enemy's ability to hold their ground. It was the break they needed. "Let's finish this," Torres said to her team, her voice steely. The assault on the supply line was brutal but efficient. Coalition forces moved with precision, taking out key outposts and severing the enemy's supply chain. The enemy, deprived of resources, began to crumble, forced to retreat in disarray. Back at the base, Darnell could no longer ignore the growing whispers of his failed efforts. When he confronted Torres, his tone was laced with suspicion. "Captain, I ordered a strategic hold. Explain to me why your forces are still advancing." Torres met his gaze steadily. "My soldiers know what's at stake. General, they took it upon themselves to do what was necessary. Surely you understand their eagerness." FT. With General Darnell removed from power, the coalition forces on Kyloria found themselves in a rare moment of calm. Captain Layla Torres had spent the last few days regrouping her forces, tending to the wounded, and briefing her team on what lay ahead. They had won a hard-fought victory, but she knew that this war had only begun to reveal its true scope. Rumors of other traitors within the coalition had started to spread, sowing seeds of doubt among her ranks. Trust had become a rare commodity, and Torres knew that if her troops were to survive the coming battles, they would need more than just weapons. They'd need allies they could rely on. One evening, as Torres reviewed her strategies, Lieutenant Erin Park entered her quarters, a look of urgency in her eyes. "Captain, we've just intercepted a message," she said, handing Torres a datapad. "It's from the United Outer Colonies." Torres raised an eyebrow. The United Outer Colonies had always maintained a tenuous neutrality in the conflict, refusing to take sides, but providing limited humanitarian support to both the coalition and their enemies. This sudden outreach felt like a lifeline or a trap. The message read, "Captain Torres, this is Ambassador Lyra Tan of the United Outer Colonies. We've been monitoring the developments on Kyloria and recognize the challenges your forces are facing. The time has come to reconsider our neutrality. I propose a meeting at an undisclosed location to discuss a potential alliance. If you are interested, bring only a small, trusted team. We will send coordinates shortly." Torres' heart quickened as she read the message. An alliance with the United Outer Colonies could tip the scales in their favor, but it could also be a ruse. She had no reason to trust them, but with the coalition's own ranks compromised, they needed allies wherever they could find them. A day later, Torres, Park, and Marcus Cale boarded a small transport shuttle, bound for the location provided by Ambassador Tan. The journey was tense. Even in the silence, she could feel the weight of her team's thoughts, each of them wondering if this mission would end in betrayal. They arrived at a small, hidden station orbiting a desolate moon, on the far edge of Coalition territory. As they disembarked, they were greeted by a group of armed guards, clad in the silver and blue uniforms of the United Outer Colonies. At the front stood a poised, dignified woman with an air of calm authority, Ambassador Lyra Tan. "Captain Torres," she greeted, her voice smooth and measured. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Torres eyed her warily. "Ambassador Tan, I appreciate your invitation, but I hope you understand that my trust doesn't come easily." Tan smiled, a glint of understanding in her eyes. "Nor should it. In times like these, trust is earned, not given, but I believe we share common goals. Please, let's talk." The ambassador led them to a private chamber, where holographic maps and tactical plans flickered across the walls. Lyra Tan didn't waste time with pleasantries. She launched straight into her proposal. "The United Outer Colonies has maintained its neutrality because we believe that both sides have valid concerns and faults," Tan began, glancing between Torres and her team. "But recent events have forced us to reconsider. We've observed acts of brutality and treachery from factions within your coalition, not to mention the discovery of General Darnell's betrayal. And while your enemies are equally ruthless, we see in your forces a genuine desire to protect, rather than conquer." Torres leaned forward, her voice steady. "So you're offering to break your neutrality? What's the catch?" Tan's gaze softened slightly. "There's no catch, but there are conditions. We'll provide you with supplies, intelligence, and some of our more advanced weaponry. In return, we expect a degree of cooperation, joint missions, intelligence sharing, and most importantly, mutual accountability. We need to know that the coalition we're backing is one we can trust." Cale crossed his arms, skeptical. "And if we agree, how do we know you won't turn on us the moment things get rough?" Tan met his gaze evenly. "You don't, but understand this. The United Outer Colonies have no interest in conquering. Our only goal is to ensure that the galaxy doesn't fall into chaos. We're offering this alliance because we believe it's our best chance for peace." Torres nodded slowly, weighing the offer. An alliance with the United Outer Colonies would give her forces a much-needed advantage, but it would also bind them to another power's interests. "Very well," Torres said finally. "We accept your offer on one condition of our own. We operate independently. If your missions align with ours, we'll work together, but I won't be forced to follow orders that compromise my people or my principles." Tan inclined her head, her eyes gleaming with respect. "Agreed, Captain Torres. I believe we have the beginnings of a powerful partnership." Back at the Coalition base, the arrival of United Outer Colonies, supplies and personnel brought a wave of both relief and unease. Soldiers whispered about their new allies, wondering if they could be trusted, but the advanced weaponry and medical supplies they brought with them were hard to argue with, and morale began to climb as Coalition forces prepared for their next offensive. Over the next few weeks, the alliance proved its worth. With intelligence provided by the United Outer Colonies, Torres and her team orchestrated a series of successful strikes, disrupting enemy supply lines and reclaiming key positions on Kyloria. The United Outer Colonies even supplied them with a new stealth craft Phantoma ship, capable of infiltrating enemy territory undetected. On a mission to intercept an enemy outpost, Torres, Park, and Cale used the Phantom to sit behind enemy lines. The sleek craft hummed softly as they approached, and Torres felt a surge of anticipation. If the intel was correct, this outpost was being used as a communications hub to relay commands to enemy forces across the sector. They landed undetected, moving swiftly and silently through the dense jungle surrounding the outpost. Cale led the way, his rifle raised, his steps silent. Park hacked into the outpost security, disabling the sensors and granting them a clear path inside.